I noticed that there's lots of different faces, probably from different backgrounds, even different geographies. And what that reflects to me is that we're all looking for different experiences, personalized experiences, tailored experiences. Technology is moving at an increased pace, okay? And this statement from Shopify, from a commerce perspective, exemplifies that. Now, typically and to date, organizations have followed a fairly similar path when they've gone down this route. They've established or tried to establish an MVP with a small set of products to try and get that into the hands of the customer as soon as possible. And that works because it's small data sets, the processes are well known and they're short, the brand is concise, and it's an evolutionary process, okay? But what that leads to is usage of the Salesforce technology that is using experience sites and things that are features that are sort of co-located on the platform. In some ways, that can lead to quite a lot of rigidity and inflexibility in what you can achieve. Where if you've got integrations involved, they can be very contract-based and not allowing for a lot of change and adaptation. But businesses these days are looking for an architecture to be adaptable. Salesforce's well-architected framework points to this very, very clearly. Okay, and headless architecture is being seen to provide that adaptability. So, what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover what we mean by headless architecture. We're going to cover the benefits. We're going to look at a few things about what you need to think about if the benefits are attractive to your business, and also some anti-patterns. And then we'll get on to the main event, which is our top tips from our learnings, and a takeaway and a bit of Q&A. Okay? Sahan.
All right. I think we have to set the scene first, right? So we need to tell, okay, what is this all about? So how different from the traditional architecture that we have? So you see in this diagram, so Salesforce themselves often encourages a shorter time to market, right? So that also means that you'll have pressure from all the angles to get your solution out there as soon as possible. And then you might lose your focus on, okay, is it the real story? Is it what I should be only worrying about, getting it out as soon as possible? Because a trade-off in that mindset is that you'll end up creating proprietary templates, very tightly coupled codes and services, and then in the long run, you will have much more challenges if you want to scale or if you want to change your direction based on the business requirements, for example. So in a normal traditional architecture, you see here that if I simply take an example, you have an application and you will write services intended for that application's use cases, right? So then you are proliferating that use case into your services. And then when the requirement grows, like you will keep on doing this at a moment that, okay, it has so many things accumulated over the time. So if I look at the headless architecture in contrast, it's nothing brand new, actually. It's another mindset that you look at the problem from a different angle. So you see that, okay, I have a certain set of business logic that I need to have, and also I have a certain set of audiences that I need to cater to. So today I have an application, and that application is intended for maybe one or two audiences in my business landscape. So if you think about from the experience point of view, it's all about decoupling your experiences from your backend logic. Okay, so you would create the services. Again, it's more like you could say like, okay, are you talking about microservices? Maybe composable services. Absolutely. So we are talking more composable architecture, and underneath the composable architecture, you would have headless architecture as a subdivision of it, because again, they are very closely connected to each other. But later on, we will talk about more and more about the differences. But it's really, in essence, you will decouple your experience from the backend. Yeah, so then you will have much more agility. Believe, we have seen this. So you'll have much more agility if you do like that. So, and also, finally, you may have heard about BFF pattern or facades when it comes to API designs. Yeah, so there are different patterns, experience APIs. Like, so if you think about it, these are all intended for very specific use cases, right? So headless architecture is more like you take a step back and you think about, okay, if I want to cater this or this logic or this specific requirement to another audience tomorrow, how I'm going to decouple it by tightly coupling it either for an audience specifically or to an application in your existing landscape. So in a nutshell, that's about headless architecture introduction.
Great. So we're going to talk a lot and refer to the terminology. So if you don't know what the terminology is, reach out afterwards, or we can spend a little bit more time. We're going to talk a lot about services. Okay, so services in that red box that provide a capability to a set of channels, set of consumers, if you will, that could change. We've done the nerdy bit, so relax. We're now going to talk a little bit more about why that's beneficial. So first and foremost, it's a little bit obvious in a way that it provides a little bit more flexibility. So by separating the technologies out between the application layer and the front end, you gain a little bit more flexibility. How do you do that? Right, well, a lot of those technologies that are used for the front end now are independent, but they're on slightly different platforms, allowing the frameworks that are specific to those platforms to be used. Ultimately, that means you've got people with the right skills working on their technologies that they understand, okay, which speeds up your time to market. Next one is obviously minimizing constraints. Obviously, if you're able to use the technology to the best of its ability, you will be able to make changes a lot quicker, which makes your overall architecture a little bit more agile. We talked about composability already, but you can then use that layering approach to ease a lot of the integrations. Obviously, there are still dependencies and connections. There's more connections in a headless architecture than there are in a traditional architecture. But depending on how you design for those services, you will minimize the dependencies. Okay. And Salesforce has done a great job, okay, of introducing industry standard ways of developing custom experiences with web components and runtimes and things like that. By using a headless approach, that wasn't me, you actually make that even better because you're less constrained by Salesforce's opinionated way of writing front-end code, okay? A good example of that is with React for mobile. That's a fairly typical use case. But with others, we had an example. We had an example where one of our customers recently developed their own framework. I think they called it the Forge framework. Absolutely. And it really promoted reuse because they defined components of their front end as reusable blocks in a CMS. You can do that in Salesforce, of course you can, but it's quite opinionated, whereas moving that away from the Salesforce platform allows a lot more flexibility in that experience layer. And because hang on, not so fast. You also allow, because of that separation, individual components of that front end can be maintained. So if it's a framework update, for example, that can be done independently of the other channels that are using it. Okay, so you get a little bit more flexibility and scalability there. The other thing, we'll come on to this a little bit later, but adaptation for the future. Because you've got that separation again and slightly less dependency, you are able to develop each of those individual consumer applications, with its capabilities in mind. Okay, so if the organization strategy changes, that might be a new channel, it might be a new experience. You can do that independently of the others. So,
All right. Okay, so I think that now you kind of start to get the whole scene, that the story that we are heading towards. So I think first of all, if you look about some of the consideration that you need to worry about in the beginning when you're thinking, am I going to step or am I going to consider this pattern in my landscape? So one of the things that you need to consider is the atomicity and idempotency, because what you are trying to do essentially, you are trying to create specific services that are intended for specific use cases, right? So it also have its own pitfall as well, right? So then what you don't want to do is like you go down that rabbit hole and then break it too much. So then you'll end up in so many services that will be again going to be a challenge. So you need to define the right level of atomicity to identify, okay, what is the scope, the scope that creates a capability or a feature that I want to understand, because beyond this level, this is not going to be my feature anymore that is intended originally. So that's very important to consider that. And also, when we are talking a lot about the services, of course, the performance. So, and then also, especially in the headless, what you are trying to do, you are trying to build something that will be used by so many other audiences. Even today, you might not know everybody that who will consume this. So, you are building something to scale, something for future. So, performance at the very center of it, right? So, you need to make sure that you take the important considerations when it comes to about load balancing, or how you manage your middleware layer to be more efficient with different mechanisms. We will touch later on about that. So those kind of things, it's very important. And then also you need to understand, because most of these services are going to be synchronous, right? Because these are not processes, asynchronous processes. So there could be asynchronous processes, but most of them will be synchronous. So in that sense, you need to have your right guardrails defined. Okay, what is our agreed response times and things like that. So you need to have that thought through as a consideration.
And the approach you take for a greenfield implementation with a headless design is very different to a brownfield implementation. With a greenfield, you have that luxury of being able to really define well with your business what a service looks like, in its reduced form, but that you can operate in a way that you can repeat it and it still performs the same action without duplicating the results. Okay, so that's your idempotency. But you're defining that in a greenfield. With a brownfield, it's a lot more difficult because you've probably got already existing dependencies between components in the application layer that you're trying to wrap in a service in the headless middleware. And so the difficulty there is being able to define the boundary lines around what that capability is and what that service is, carve it up from an existing implementation where there's already a way of working. Okay, that's difficult. That's really difficult in a brownfield implementation. So let's just talk about some of the anti-patterns that you might see if you went down this route. I call these the mistakes we made. So business logic bleeding into the front end. Think about that for a minute. If you've got business logic in one front end, chances are that you will then need to replicate it in all the other consumer applications if you want consistency. There may be legitimate reasons why you want them to be separate, but ultimately the service is going to provide the service, its function. Okay, you don't want to have to maintain replicated functionality in all of the consumer applications. The second one is multi-purpose APIs. Don't define an API that then grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, because it then holds a lot of demand and it also loses its atomicity as well. Next one, mandatory data is not available. So you shouldn't have services, or at least front end functions that are dependent on data being a certain state. We're all familiar with stateless operation, and that's really pointing to that. Excessive dependencies and bloating. We've already talked about dependencies, so I won't dwell too much on that. And then the last one is, Sahan mentioned it before, but if you have too many services that are doing such small functions, you end up with an increase in the volume of API calls and a very chatty front end to middle layer. And that can be a drain on, I mean, it could be a costly operation because you need more licenses or more API calls to the Salesforce platform to use. It could be additional complexity in that middleware layer at the top that's providing headless services, or it could just end up being more points of failure in messages. So that's what to look out for. Let's move on.
Yeah. That's the interesting bit.
The main event. This is what you've been waiting for. What are our top tips, right, for succeeding? So, Sahan, do you want to go with the first one?
Yeah, of course. I think I myself, I was like, okay, what we're trying to do, because in the beginning, I set the scene saying that we are trying to, first of all, we are trying to change our thought process on how we approach this design, right? So that's where you need to understand what is our vision. If you sit with the business and explain, you know what, today you have a requirement of setting up a storefront to become digital, right? And then have you thought about, could you also extend your services towards third-party exchanges or marketplaces, or people can sell your services and products to other people via their channels? Have you thought about it? Things like that. So if you think about that, then that's the vision. That's where that you tell the customer that, okay, you don't have to stop here. You can be like this, so you can define your business vision like this and strategy like this. So it's very important that you have to have defined channel strategies. So you need to understand what are the different channels that your business is evolving into, and also the consumer versus customer experience, because like I said, it could be different audiences, right? So the different audiences will demand different experiences. So you need to identify and classify those experiences, and then that would kind of provide you sort of like a baseline for you to understand, okay, what are the parameters that you need to watch out. And also the composition. So you need to have, you don't want to end up in a situation where you end up with a bunch of services that are really maybe very much independent and then doesn't make much sense together, because you need to have, you need to provide an experience at the end of the day, right? So then the services needs to be closer and composing that experience all together. So that's why the vision and strategy is very important. Second one.
An API first mindset. I think this is a given, really, because we're talking about middleware, we're talking about services between front end and application layer. We talked about the business logic bleeding into the front end. Okay, adhering to and enforcing that policy means you've got a good separation of concerns. So your front end is exactly for that. It's for front end. It's for presentation. It's for guiding the experience. Your middleware providing services to those different consumer applications is exactly for that, and that's what it needs to be used for. Your application layer is for all the logic that supports those services, okay, and so on and so forth. We talked about carving up those services and capabilities so that they are well defined and that they're reusable, allowing that composability. Of course, those who are familiar with MuleSoft are probably also familiar with the three-tier structure of experience, process, and system. That's a good approach to take in that front-end middleware because it's providing what is facing the front end, but also if there is any logic that needs to be in those middleware services, you're creating that separation and composability in that layer itself. And please document what you're going to build and how it's meant to work, what it's meant to be used for. Okay.
Yeah. So next, I think this is a very interesting one. You need to leverage the strength of each technologies because you are trying to compose something that consists of maybe different tools, the mechanisms, the patterns. So it's very important to understand who has what strength in your scene, right? So I'll give you a very good example. So imagine that you are building a system that you are, okay, your intention is to extend your services to a third-party marketplace. So now, what they need product information, right? So they need product information from you, right? You cannot ask, okay, you know what, I will send you a CSV, can you put that in your marketplace? Well, it doesn't work because your product information is evolving and you want these integrations to evolve with it. So there are multiple things you can do. You could bake that product information into your existing services, or you can identify a PIM system, product information management system, to be a standalone centrally managed system that have all your product information that can be exposed as a service to any consumer as you wish. So things like that. So you need to understand the strengths of certain technologies and use them in the right use cases. So some of the things like CMS frameworks. So because like I said, everything has or had a purpose initially when it was born, right? So you need to understand and tap into that and get the best out of it. So the middleware, I think we already touched enough about the middleware. So, and then also the balance of on-prem and cloud. This is a very interesting one. Believe when I say it, because we really suffered with this one. Because you might end up in a situation that, okay, there are certain services running on-prem and the organization has not moved completely to cloud, so it's in the transition state. So then you have synchronization dependencies. Okay, I created something on-prem, but I'm waiting now until it becomes available in cloud. So those kind of things. So it's really something that you need to look into and talk with the business. Okay, how are we going to mitigate this challenge? I think it's very important.
That was really painful, really painful. Because the business was going through that transition of moving, core applications and core functions that are used by their backend into the cloud. So, and at the same time, developing those services so that they were more capable when they were deployed, on the cloud as cloud services. So we had constraints on the existing way of working for those services. We built to use those, but then the business were transitioning and had a timeline for moving to the cloud version. The cloud version was always, oh yeah, you can do that, but not in this version. You can do it in that version, but we can't connect to that version yet, right? So it's very difficult to manage those constraints. I really like the PIM one, which is, I mean, what we're talking about there is master data, really, and making that available across the enterprise. We took the example there of product information, but it could be customer information. It could be, account information. It could be a lot of things. Okay, and PIM, the designation of a PIM is one of the, certainly in a commerce space, one of the technology capabilities that is missed most. An anti-pattern that we saw was actually trying to use Salesforce as the PIM. It's not meant for that. Okay, and it's a dedicated capability. We'll move on to the next one. Okay, so prioritize performance and security. Okay, this is really critical. When you have aligned and defined that boundary line around the services you need to support the consumer applications in line with your strategy, you will need to decide for each of those services whether they need to be operating synchronously or asynchronously. How time critical are they when it is powering that experience in the front end? Okay. We went through a process of cataloging all our services and deciding whether they were needed to be synchronous or not. If you don't need it to be synchronous, if you start with asynchronous and only make them synchronous where necessary, was the pattern we ended up with. Okay. Response times, and again, that's similar to what we were just talking about, but this is more on the performance side. If it drives an experience in the front end, it has to be performant. If it's asynchronous, likelihood is that it can take a little longer. But you need to know how fast or how quickly each of those services is going to respond, okay? Because you're ultimately driving that experience. Availability, this is an interesting one where in that middleware, we had the concept of if a service wasn't operating the way it should, then we were able to fail over to another version of the same service, meaning that we had ultimate uptime, not compromising that experience. And that's not just for one application, that's serving each consumer application as one service. So really important that you have availability on each of those services considered. Caching, we talked about master data, and master data, caching comes in, it's a very middleware focused feature. But if you've got slowly changing data, you don't need to get that every time, okay? So you can cache that data only where it is not sensitive data. I've got to call that out before anyone shouts at me and said, you're not going to put customer data in there, are you? No, we're not going to put customer data in there. So caching is really important, specifically for slowly changing data though. And that helps the performance, okay? The next two were also very important. So in a similar way to synchronous versus asynchronous operation and caching, in some situations where the experience in the front end wasn't time critical because it was related to providing a view on data that was slowly changing or used as a reference to aid performance, we didn't need that to be running as an end user. It could be a system user, okay? But that requires a different pattern of authentication and authorization, right? There are some services that are necessarily in context of that running user because it is relating to honoring the security model in Salesforce, for example. We don't want to expose data to the front end that is not meant to be shown, okay, to that user. So identifying, first of all, what is your system user authentication authorization pattern to use versus your running user context that flows through the services themselves, okay? So that you need to know which services are going to be using which patterns at that point. And then finally, it's a bit obvious, these services are going to be exposed to multiple consumer applications that are also subject or open to attack. So you need to have the right protection mechanisms built into the services at each of the layers in your architecture to make sure that if there's one service that's subject to attack, it's not going to proliferate throughout the entire front to back, okay? Defense in depth.
Yeah, I think the last one is quite interesting because if you build your services with direct access to query execution, for an example, okay, that's the end of the story there. So you need to be very careful about those things. So the final one, I think now this is also quite given that how we build the story for this one. So you need to minimize the dependencies because you cannot have tiny parts. To get out something meaningful, you need to connect like 10 parts together. So that's why it's also important, as we mentioned earlier, that you need to understand this from the capability, functionality point of view, right? So you need to, you are not blindly going to create services for a bunch of operations. You need to understand, okay, what capability I'm trying to deliver and what functionality. So then you can define your boundaries and your scope. So it's quite important that you minimize the dependencies. And also, this one is quite a nice one. The feature controlling. So maybe you guys do this already, but it's really powerful. It's quite, I must say that especially during testing, deployments, debugging, it's really important that you have this pattern of feature controlling, right? So Salesforce themselves have that, and you can also build that into your solutions. And that feature control come in different flavors, like maybe you have the control mechanisms or driven by switch, or you have the versioning mechanisms also. And then also the infrastructure mitigation, of course, given that we are talking in the context of services, you need to think about that infrastructure side. Can your middleware handle this amount of load, the API gateway constraints, and all those things from the infrastructure point of view? You need to evaluate how ready you are.
The last one is also an unlocked capability. So because you're separating the front end from the application layer and the back end, actually it allows you to do A/B testing on experience with customers. If you think about trying to do that on the Salesforce platform with experience sites, you're probably going to be creating audiences, and if it doesn't work, you're going to have to roll back changes and so on. Actually, with a lot of the front end technologies these days, CMSs and so on, you can do that a lot easier by having it separate. So really opens the door for tailoring those experiences to what resonates with the customers. You know? And so, move on.
Yes.
What did you hear? Innovation in technology is moving at pace, and it's changing the expectations of the customer. Companies do need to be able to adapt, and increasingly adapt as well, but they don't want to be held back by the technology platforms. It's worth the investment of time and effort into thinking about how does your architecture work in a headless way, serving multiple consumer applications that face the customer or partners or other businesses. But it does help to improve agility and scale. So if you then, reflecting on everything that we've seen, think that headless architecture is something that you want to explore in your business, but you already see some of the pitfalls, the anti-patterns and so on, you know what to do. Keep calm and go headless. Thank you.
All right.